my clean clothes on top of the dirty washing machine, and then she called me a stupid hillbilly.
I was being nice. She's a crazy, stupid hillbilly.
Imagine your favorite characters suddenly acting like strangers in the final episodes. It is a TV nightmare that has happened more times than you think. We are about to reveal the sitcoms that totally lost their way in the end. We will even show you the series finale that was so hated it is considered one of the worst of all time. 1. Roseanne.
Yeah, I need to get 10 years of Cheeto dust off this table.
Great, now our cold drinks will be sitting directly on the wood.
For 8 seasons, Roseanne was a show that felt real. It was about the Connor family, a blue-collar household in Illinois, just trying to get by. They dealt with money problems, raising kids, and all the ups and downs of life in a way that felt honest and funny. Roseanne, Dan, Darlene, Becky, and DJ felt like a real family you could know. The heart of the show was its down-to-earth humor and relatable struggles. Then came Season 9. In a twist that nobody saw coming, the Connors won the state lottery. Suddenly, this family that clipped coupons was living a life of unbelievable wealth and luxury. The entire tone of the show changed overnight. The relatable problems were gone, replaced with fantasy storylines, weird celebrity cameos, and plots that felt like they belonged in a completely different universe. The show lost its heart, and fans were left scratching their heads. But the weirdest part was the finale. In the last few minutes, Roseanne reveals that the entire 9th season, and parts of the seasons before it, never really happened. She says she made it all up for a book she was writing. And then, in a truly heartbreaking twist, she reveals that Dan did not survive his heart attack from the end of Season 8. It was a shocking and sad ending that completely undid the happy show fans had loved for years. Erasing your own story is a wild move. But what if a show spent 9 years building up to one single moment, only to throw it all away in the final 2 minutes? Our next show did exactly that, and fans are still upset about it today. 2. How I Met Your Mother.
Ding dong. Oh, what's that? The doorbell? That's the suit I'm talking about.
I haven't gotten to the door yet.
Okay, let me know when you get there.
For 9 long seasons, How I Met Your Mother was built around a single, simple question. Who is the mother? The entire show was about Ted Mosby telling his kids the long and winding story of how he met their mom. Along the way, we fell in love with his friends, the hilarious couple Marshall and Lily, the smooth-talking Barney, and the tough but lovable Robin. The show was famous for its clever running gags, heartfelt moments, and the slow, mysterious build-up to the big reveal. In the final season, we finally got to meet the mother, Tracy McConnell. And she was perfect. She was funny, she was charming, and her chemistry with Ted was everything fans had hoped for. The whole season was set during Barney and Robin's wedding weekend, and through flashbacks, we saw how Tracy fit perfectly into the group. It seemed like the show was heading for a beautiful, satisfying ending. And then, the last 5 minutes of the finale happened. In a shocking rush, the show reveals that the mother gets sick and passes away. And the real reason Ted was telling the story was to get his kids' permission to ask out. Aunt Robin. After all those years, after a whole season dedicated to Robin marrying Barney, the show broke them up and put Ted and Robin back together. Fans felt cheated. It was an ending that went against everything the show had been building, and it remains one of the most controversial finales in sitcom history. A bad ending can sour the whole series. But what happens when a show loses its main star and tries to keep going anyway? Our next show found out the hard way that some characters are just irreplaceable. 3. That 70s Show.
How could he be failing math?
Kitty, I'm sure he did the best he could. For someone who was held too long as a baby.
Let's head down to the basement in Point Place, Wisconsin. For 7 seasons, That 70s Show was a hilarious and nostalgic trip back in time. The show centered on Eric Foreman and his group of friends, his girlfriend Donna, the cool guy Hyde, the goofy Kelso, the high-maintenance Jackie, and the foreign exchange student Fez. The chemistry between these 6 friends was the absolute heart and soul of the show. Their conversations in the basement circle were the stuff of legend. But at the end of the 7th season, the actor who played Eric Topher Grace decided to leave the show, and with him went the show's main character. This left a huge hole that the writers just could not fill. The 8th and final season felt empty. The gang just was not the same without their witty, nerdy leader. To make matters worse, the show tried to replace him. They introduced a new character named Randy, played by actor Josh Myers. Randy was supposed to be a smooth, funny guy who worked with Hyde at the record store. The problem was, fans hated him. He felt like a forced replacement, and his romance with Donna felt completely unearned. The final season limped to the finish line, feeling like a shadow of its former self. Without Eric, the magic was just gone. Losing your main character is a death blow for most shows. But what about a show that kept its main characters but changed the entire setting and format, leaving fans wondering if they were even watching the same series? 4. Scrubs.
Got something to say?
Nope, not this time. Well, yes, frankly, I think that you're being condescending and you're being overly sensitive.
For 8 seasons, Scrubs was a brilliant mix of comedy and drama. It followed the lives of doctors at Sacred Heart Hospital, led by the daydreaming J.D., his best friend Turk, his on-again, off-again love Elliot, and their tough-as-nails mentor, Dr. Cox. The show was praised for its fast-paced, quirky humor, its surprisingly realistic medical stories, and its deeply emotional moments. The Season 8 finale was a perfect send-off, with J.D. leaving Sacred Heart and seeing a montage of his future. It was a beautiful, tear-jerking ending. And then, for some reason, the show came back for a 9th season. But it was not really Scrubs anymore. The show was rebranded as Scrubs, Med School, and the setting moved to a medical school. Most of the original cast was gone or only made small guest appearances. The focus shifted to a new group of young, uninteresting medical students. Fans were confused and disappointed. The new characters lacked the charm and chemistry of the original cast. The humor felt forced, and the emotional heart of the show was gone. It felt like a completely different and much worse show that was just using the Scrubs name. Most fans prefer to pretend that Season 9 never happened and that the show ended perfectly with Season 8. It's tough when a show tries to reboot itself and fails. But our next show did something even stranger. It kept going after its main character left, and the result was one of the most bizarre final seasons ever. 5. The Office.
Filling that out right now. It wasn't meant for me. I will not be your Valentine. Oh, nuts.
For 7 glorious seasons, Michael Scott was the heart and soul of The Office. As the regional manager of Dunder Mifflin, his cringe-worthy antics, his desperate need to be loved, and his hidden moments of genius made the show a comedy masterpiece. The relationships between the other characters, like Jim and Pam, and Dwight and Angela, were also fantastic. But it was Michael who drove the story. When Steve Carell left the show, it had a massive hole to fill. The show decided to continue for 2 more seasons without him, and the results were mixed, to be kind. The 8th and 9th seasons struggled to find their footing. They tried out different managers, like the intense Robert California and the bumbling Andy Bernard, but no one could capture that Michael Scott magic. The final seasons introduced new, unlikable characters and storylines that just felt weird and out of place. The plot with the sound guy Brian trying to get with Pam was particularly hated by fans. While the series finale itself is considered by many to be a beautiful and satisfying conclusion, the journey to get there in those last 2 seasons was a rough ride. It proved that sometimes, when the main character leaves, it might be time to just turn off the cameras. Losing a main character is one thing, but what about a show that had all its characters for the finale and still managed to create an ending so unpopular that it is still debated to this day? 6. Seinfeld's
I spoke to some of my sisters about that coffee shop.
Oh, the sisters.
You seen the waitresses in there lately? I never had so much coffee in my life.
Seinfeld was famously known as the show about nothing. For 9 seasons, it was one of the smartest, funniest, and most influential sitcoms ever made. Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer were 4 selfish, petty, and hilarious friends living in New York City. The show broke all the rules. It had no hugs, no learning, and the characters never really grew or changed. And that is exactly why people loved it. The finale was one of the most watched television events in history. Everyone was dying to know how the show about nothing would end. The answer, it turned out, was with a trial. The 4 main characters are put on trial in a small town for breaking a Good Samaritan law. They did not help a man who was being carjacked. Instead, they just stood there and made jokes. The trial becomes a parade of all the people the gang had wronged over the years. Dozens of memorable guest stars came back to testify against them. In the end, the 4 are found guilty and sentenced to a year in prison. The final scene shows them sitting in a jail cell, having the same pointless conversation they had in the very first episode. Many fans and critics hated it. They felt it was a mean-spirited and unsatisfying way to say goodbye to these iconic characters. Sending your characters to jail is a bold final move. But our next show did something that, in its own way, felt just as final. It sent its main character so far away that the show had to completely change its formula. 7. Happy Days.
Oh, yes, I am. Oh, yes. Hold it. This is a non-violence thing. A what? Non-violence. What a great time to tell me that.
For most of its run, Happy Days was the biggest show on television. It was a sweet, nostalgic look at life in the 1950s, centered around the Cunningham family and their cool, leather jacket-wearing friend, the Fonz. The friendship between the wholesome Richie Cunningham and the effortlessly cool Arthur Fonzarelli was the heart of the show. But after 7 seasons, the actor who played Richie, Ron Howard, decided to leave to become a movie director. This was a huge blow. The show tried to fill the void by bringing in new characters and giving the Fonz a bigger role as a teacher at the local high school. But the dynamic was never the same. The later seasons of Happy Days are often pointed to as the prime example of a show that went on for too long. The plots became more and more ridiculous. The show famously had a moment in Season 5 where Fonzie jumped over a shark on water skis, a moment so silly it created the phrase, "jumping the shark." The final seasons from 8 to 11 proved that the show had truly lost its way, a far cry from the simple charm that made it a hit. Jumping a shark is a pretty clear sign a show is in trouble. But what if a show's troubles were happening in real life, leading to a final season that felt more like a train wreck than a comedy? 8. 2.5 Men.
What's worse than money and women?
He bought an ugly bowl and put it on the front table.
For 8 seasons, 2.5 Men was a ratings giant. It was a simple but effective comedy about a carefree bachelor named Charlie Harper whose life is turned upside down when his uptight brother Alan and his nephew Jake move in with him. The show was a huge success, thanks in large part to the performance of its star, Charlie Sheen. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. Charlie Sheen's public behavior became more and more erratic, leading to a very public feud with the show's creator, Chuck Lorre. In the end, Sheen was fired from his own hit show. This left the producers with a huge problem. How do you continue a show called 2.5 Men without one of the men? Their solution was to hire actor Ashton Kutcher to play a new character, a quirky internet billionaire named Walden Schmidt, who buys Charlie's house. The show limped along for 4 more seasons, but it was never the same. The final season was particularly strange, culminating in a finale that was one of the most bizarre in TV history. It focused almost entirely on the character of Charlie, who was revealed to be alive, only to have a cartoon piano fall on him in the final seconds. It was a weird and bitter end to what was once the biggest comedy on TV. A bitter ending can hurt a show's legacy. But what happens when a critically acclaimed show comes back years later, only for the revival to completely miss the magic that made it special in the first place? 9. Arrested Development.
I am not guilty. I didn't want to tell you this. Are you ready for the bombshell?
Andy Griffith was in the bombshell?
The first 3 seasons of Arrested Development are considered by many to be comedy perfection. The story of the wealthy, dysfunctional Bluth family was packed with clever running gags, intricate wordplay, and a cast that had flawless chemistry. When the show was canceled too soon, fans begged for years for it to come back. In 2013, they got their wish when Netflix revived the series for a 4th season. But something was wrong. Due to the actors' busy schedules, they could rarely film scenes together. So, the 4th season was structured with each episode focusing on a single character. This completely destroyed the group dynamic that made the show work. The jokes fell flat, and the overlapping storylines were more confusing than clever. A few years later, they tried to fix it by releasing a remixed version of Season 4, and then a 5th and final season that brought the cast back together. Unfortunately, the magic was still gone. The storylines were weak, the actors often seemed like they were filmed against a green screen, and the spark that made the original run so brilliant had vanished. For many fans, the revival seasons only served to tarnish the memory of a once-perfect show. It's tough when a revival fails to capture the old magic. But what about a show that didn't lose its magic, but instead found a very serious message that pushed all the comedy aside? 10. Gilmore Girls.
Hi.
He was just telling me that he actually grew up right around the corner from here.
Oh, really?
Stonehouse on the corner.
Oh, the one with the Dobermans.
That's right.
For 6 seasons, Gilmore Girls was a television masterpiece. The show was famous for its incredibly fast, witty, and pop culture-filled dialogue. The relationship between the single mom, Lorelai Gilmore, and her brilliant daughter, Rory, was the heart of the series. The quirky town of Stars Hollow and its cast of colorful characters made it feel like a real place you wanted to visit. All of this magic came from the minds of its creators, Amy Sherman Palladino, and her husband, Daniel Palladino. But after season 6, due to a contract dispute with the network, the Palladinos left the show. They were replaced by a new team of writers for the 7th and final season. And unfortunately, the difference was obvious. The dialogue, once so sharp and clever, felt flat. The characters' voices were just a little bit off. The storylines took strange turns that felt out of character, especially Lorelai's sudden marriage to Rory's dad, Christopher. The magical spark of the show was gone. While the new writers tried their best to imitate the original style, it just wasn't the same. Fans were left with a final season that felt like a cover band trying to play their favorite songs. Losing the creators is a tough blow. But what if a show didn't lose its writers, but instead found a new, very serious message that pushed all the comedy away in its final season? 11. Ellen.
Should I smile or not smile? Let me see you smile. You've seen my smile before. I need to see it again.
For its first few seasons, Ellen was a popular sitcom starring comedian Ellen DeGeneres as a funny, quirky bookstore owner named Ellen Morgan. It was a light, enjoyable show in the same vein as Seinfeld, focusing on the small, funny observations of everyday life. But in the 4th season, the show made history. In a huge television event called The Puppy Episode, the character of Ellen Morgan came out as gay, at the same time that Ellen DeGeneres herself came out in real life. It was a brave and groundbreaking moment. The problem was what happened afterward. In the fifth and final season, the show's focus shifted completely. It was no longer a comedy about everyday life. It was now a show about the challenges of being gay. While the topics were important, the episodes often felt more like educational lessons than sitcoms. The light-hearted humor was gone, replaced by a preachy tone that turned many viewers away. Ratings plummeted, and the network canceled the show. It was a case where a historic moment ended up changing a show so much that it lost the audience it once had. A show losing its comedic touch is a bad sign. But what happens when a show loses its star and has to completely reinvent itself? 12. Valerie, Chandra, The Hogan Family.
It's my note, Mom. You read my note? Once your pants hit the hamper, they're public domain.
In the mid-'80s, the sitcom Valerie was a solid hit. It starred actress Valerie Harper as Valerie Hogan, a wife and mother of 3 boys. The show was a pretty standard family sitcom, focusing on the everyday challenges of raising a family. It was warm, funny, and relatable. But after the second season, a major dispute happened behind the scenes. Valerie Harper had a disagreement with the producers over her salary and her role in the show. The conflict got so bad that the network made a shocking decision. They fired the star of the show. How do you continue a show called Valerie without Valerie? At the start of Season 3, the show returned with a new title, Valerie's Family. The first episode opened with the shocking news that the character of Valerie had passed away in an off-screen car accident. The family was now being looked after by their aunt, Sandy, played by actress Sandy Duncan. The show was now about a grieving family trying to move on. A season later, they changed the title again to The Hogan Family. The show continued for several more seasons, but it was a completely different series, born from a behind-the-scenes drama that changed everything. Writing out a main character in such a permanent way is a bold choice. But what if the main character's real-life passing forces a show to make a heartbreaking change? 13. 8 Simple Rules.
Open-minded by talking to Ben.
And then?
And then we tell him not to let his ass hit...
When 8 Simple Rules for Dating. My teenage daughter premiered, it was an instant success, largely because of its star, the legendary John Ritter. He played Paul Hennessy, a dad who starts working from home to help raise his 2 teenage daughters and son. Ritter was a master of physical comedy, and his hilarious and often over-the-top reactions to his daughters' dating lives were the heart of the show. Then, tragedy struck. During the filming of the show's second season, John Ritter unexpectedly passed away. The cast, crew, and audience were devastated. The show was faced with an impossible decision. Should they cancel the show, or should they try to continue without their beloved star? They chose to continue, and they did so by incorporating the real-life tragedy into the story. The show returned with a powerful and heartbreaking hour-long episode where the family learns that Paul has passed away. The rest of the series became about the family grieving and learning to live without their husband and father. Actors James Garner and David Spade were brought in to help fill the void. While the show was praised for handling the situation with grace and sensitivity, it was, by necessity, a completely different show. The light-hearted comedy was replaced by a show that was often sad and serious. Dealing with a real-life tragedy is the hardest thing a show can face. But our next show faced a different kind of challenge. What happens when your main star has to leave because of a serious health issue? 14. Spin City.
Wish you would have told me that before I came in.
Why? So you could have gotten extra dialed up for Daddy?
For 4 seasons, Spin City was one of the sharpest and funniest sitcoms on TV. It starred Michael J. Fox as Mike Flaherty, the deputy mayor of New York City. He was charming, quick-witted, and brilliant at his job of spinning the news and cleaning up the messes of the clumsy, goofy mayor. The cast was incredible, and the writing was fast and smart. But behind the scenes, Michael J. Fox was dealing with a personal health battle. He had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease years earlier, and his symptoms were becoming more pronounced. He made the difficult decision to leave the show at the end of the 4th season to focus on his health and advocacy work. His final episode was emotional and beautifully done, as his character took the blame for a scandal to save his friends and moved to Washington, D.C. The show, however, decided to go on. They brought in Charlie Sheen to play a new deputy mayor, Charlie Crawford. While Sheen was a popular actor, the chemistry of the show was never the same. The dynamic had shifted completely. The clever political satire was toned down, and the show became more of a standard workplace sitcom. It lasted for 2 more seasons, but for most fans, the real Spin City ended the day Mike Flaherty got in that taxi. It's hard to replace a star, but what if the star doesn't leave, but their off-screen behavior causes the show to crumble from the inside out? 15. Grace Under Fire.
Louise, I found this in your pocket in the laundry today.
I didn't do anything wrong.
Oh.
In the mid-90s, Grace Under Fire was a massive hit. The show starred stand-up comedian Brett Butler as Grace Kelly, a single mom and recovering alcoholic who is trying to raise her 3 kids after leaving an abusive marriage. The show was praised for its honest and funny look at a blue-collar woman's struggles. It was sharp, witty, and had a lot of heart. But as the show's popularity grew, its star began to struggle with her own personal demons. Brett Butler had a well-documented battle with substance abuse. Her behavior on set became increasingly difficult and unpredictable. The production was often delayed, and the work environment became tense. The show's quality started to suffer. Key writers and cast members began to leave. The 5th and final season was a mess. Production was shut down multiple times as Butler tried to deal with her health issues. The network eventually lost patience and canceled the show in the middle of the season without even filming a proper finale. It was a sad and messy end for a show that had once been so promising. A show collapsing and not getting a real ending is a sad story. But what could be worse? How about a show that ended on purpose with a giant cliffhanger, promising a resolution that never, ever came? 16. ALF.
I have never clog danced in my life.
Oh, it's easy. I mean, what do? You just clog up a sink and dance around it, right?
For 4 seasons, the sitcom ALF was a cultural phenomenon. The show was about a furry, wisecracking alien from the planet Melmac who crash lands in the garage of the suburban Tanner family. ALF, which stands for Alien Life Form, hides out with the family while trying to repair his spaceship, all while constantly trying to eat the family cat, Lucky. It was a silly, high-concept, but very lovable family show. As the show reached its 4th season, the ratings started to dip, and the network was unsure if they would renew it. The writers decided to create a big, dramatic season finale to try and boost interest. In the final episode, ALF finally makes contact with his fellow survivors from Melmac, who are coming to pick him up. He says a tearful goodbye to the Tanners and goes to the rendezvous point. But just as the spaceship appears, the U.S. government's alien task force shows up and captures him. The screen fades to black with the words, "To be continued." The problem is, it never was. The network canceled the show, leaving fans with a permanent cliffhanger. ALF was a prisoner, and we never found out what happened to him. A later TV movie tried to wrap things up, but it did not feature the Tanner family and is widely disliked by fans. Leaving your main character in a terrible spot is a dark way to end a show. But what if a show went even darker and decided to end with the entire family facing a truly terrible, unavoidable fate? 17. Dinosaurs.
Lived happily ever after.
Well, that was the idea.
What happened?
Well, some dinosaurs wondered if they were doing the right thing.
For most of its run, Dinosaurs was a fun and clever family sitcom that just happened to star a family of animatronic dinosaurs. It was basically a modern family comedy set in prehistoric times with the Sinclair family, Earl, Fran, Robbie, Charlene, and the scene-stealing baby. The show tackled everyday family issues with a satirical prehistoric twist. It was goofy, funny, and full of catchphrases like, "Not the mama." But the final episode of the fourth and final season took a shocking and incredibly dark turn. The episode, titled Changing Nature, was an environmental fable. Earl's company, in its quest for profit, has destroyed the environment so badly that it triggers the start of a massive ice age. The final scene is one of the most haunting in sitcom history. The family huddles together in their home as snow begins to fall. A TV news anchor signs off for the last time, and they realize that there is no hope. They are all going to freeze and become extinct. For a show that was mostly lighthearted and aimed at families, this bleak, depressing ending was a complete shock to the system and left a generation of kids feeling pretty down. Ending a show by wiping out the entire cast is about as bleak as it gets. But sometimes a finale can be just as heartbreaking by destroying the one thing the show was built on: a beautiful friendship. 18. Will and Grace, original run.
Can I run something by you?
Honey, could you give me a minute? I'm kind of in the middle of a project.
For 8 seasons, Will and Grace was a groundbreaking and hilarious sitcom. It was one of the first successful shows to feature gay main characters, and it did so with incredible wit and charm. But at its core, the show was about the unbreakable friendship between Will, a lawyer, and Grace, an interior designer. Their codependent, loving, and hilarious relationship was the foundation of the entire series, along with their scene-stealing friends, Jack and Karen. The show was always about how this group was a chosen family. So when the original series finale aired, fans were shocked by the direction it took. The finale jumped forward in time, revealing that Will and Grace had a massive fight over their priorities and stopped speaking to each other for 20 years. 20 years. They only reconciled 2 decades later when their own children happened to meet and fall in love while moving into college. While they did become friends again in the end, the idea that they would let a fight keep them apart for so long felt like a complete betrayal of their characters and the show's central theme. Thankfully, when the show was revived years later, the creators wisely decided that this entire finale was just a dream. Destroying the core friendship of a show is a bold and often hated move. But what if a show did not just ruin a friendship, but ruined its main character over time, turning a clever anti-hero into someone fans just could not stand anymore? 19. Weeds.
Get out of here!
Oh, my girlfriend needs help.
It's okay, honey. You can step out.
When Weeds first started, it was a sharp, funny, and dark satire. The show was about Nancy Botwin, a suburban mom who starts dealing with cannabis to support her family after her husband's sudden passing. The first few seasons were praised for their clever writing and for exploring the hypocrisy of suburban life. Nancy was a fascinating anti-hero, making bad decisions for what she believed were good reasons. But as the seasons went on, the show got crazier and crazier. Nancy and her family went from selling small amounts in their town to getting involved with international cartels and becoming fugitives. The clever satire was replaced by increasingly ridiculous and unbelievable plot twists. By the 8th and final season, many fans felt the show was unrecognizable. The characters, especially Nancy, had become deeply unlikable and selfish. The final season featured another time jump, with contrived storylines that felt rushed. The finale, which tried to give Nancy a somewhat happy ending, felt unearned after all the chaos and harm she had caused. It was a disappointing end to a show that had started with so much promise. A disappointing ending is one thing, but what about a show that ended by making its main character a villain and then undoing its own happy ending? Our final show did just that, twice. 20. Roseanne, the reboot.
Dad, will you tell her how stupid she's being?
That's never worked out for me.
We started with Roseanne, and we are going to end with Roseanne. Years after its strange and controversial finale, the show came back for a 10th season, a reboot with the entire original cast. And the first thing it did was erase the old finale. Dan was alive and well, the lottery win never happened, and the family was back to their old, relatable, working-class selves. The revival was a massive ratings hit. It was funny, it was smart, and it felt like the old show we all loved. But behind the scenes, history was repeating itself. The show's star, Roseanne Barr, made some controversial comments online, and the network swiftly fired her and canceled the hit reboot. But the story does not end there. The network decided to continue the show without her. Just like they did with Valerie decades earlier, they created a spin-off called The Connors. And just like before, the show opened with the news that the main character had passed away off-screen. The rest of the cast continued on, and The Connors became a successful show in its own right. It is a crazy story of a show that hadn't one, but 2 final seasons that tried to ruin it, creating one of the most complicated and unusual legacies in sitcom history.